seen my previous reviews, I did the NES and the Super NES. Now let's go to my second system actually, but first system I really remember playing as a kid, the Nintendo 64. Now before this I actually had a Sega, but I don't have very many childhood memories playing with that, or younger me playing with that. But this is a classic system. It has a cartridge system, which at the time was starting to get outdated, but it's still a very nice system. It's a lot lighter than the NES and the Super Nintendo slightly. And it's actually a really nice system cosmetically. You can see the symbol. It's a lot more flashy than the other symbols. Even though this one's probably the most boring of the NES colors, it's still a really cool system. They have the nice top container, similar to the Super NES. And power buttons, very similar to the other systems, just put in different spots. And rather than being buttons, this one's a switch, and this one's a button, which is a lot. I think this is nicer, the switch. I think it'd be easier not to break. You got that nice open memory expansion. And 4 controller cartridges, which is very nice. You can play up to 4 player. I've never had more than 2 controllers on this for some reason. You can see this big empty space in the back. Now that actually comes into play. Let me try and fish that out quick. You stick this dinosaur in the back, and it makes it, I'm not going to plug it in all the way, so you just have to plug that in, which is actually very useful. Let me pick up what was dropped. And now the controller. Now, I both like and dislike this controller in many ways. Let me untangle it quick. First off, the plug-in. You just plug it in up front. It's a little stiffer than the Nintendo Entertainment System and other things like that, but it's not too terrible. Once you plug it in, you have the controller. Now this is one of the most awkwardly designed controllers ever. I like how they tried to element like the Atari with the joystick, also replicating their power pads, the normal Nintendo power pad or D-pad. Start, no select, A, B, and then you got the, these are usually like the extra moves. They didn't usually do more than 4 buttons, in future systems, but those are there, L and R. The awkward thing about this controller is, some games you control like this, and then you got the jump, the standard, and then these do some extra stuff. But usually it's kind of easy to shift around here, and if I'm using it like this, it's good. I just don't like this big handle in the bottom, because I have to steer them something like this. Then it feels awkward like this. I know it's not that much big of a deal, but I usually like to have my fingers like this, and then I don't want to have to like do this and then switch over like this. It just takes a little extra time. They also have the back button. But the cool thing about this is it's actually more compatible with other things, like you can put in like these extra expansion things. You got this one. They're kind of hard to get in and out, but they're not terrible once you get used to it. You can do that with the Game Boy one. This one's really cool for like Pokemon Stadium and stuff, but honestly there's not too much you can do with it. I wish you could also use it as like plug it in and use it as like play Game Boy on it, but you can't. And then there's also some other accessories that you can plug into it, like this piece of crap for Hey You Pikachu. I don't even know why I bought that game. It's pretty bad. But you can plug that in, and that plugs in from the into the controller port, which is fine because this is usually only used for one-player games. But there are a few accessories like that. Would I have preferred it to be plugged into the back of the controller? That might have been useful, because then you just like have this similar design, except instead of this you could plug it into the back. Then I wouldn't have to use up as many controller ports. But it doesn't really matter in the long run. There's a lot of third-party equipment. These controllers are even worse, like the SuperPad 64. Really bad. I mean, like, this one's just harder to use. I mean, like, you can take this out. It's just all around not a very handy controller. So I'd stick with the first-party controllers. And this is actually a really cheap console. now that I got all that sort of tech-ish stuff done, let's take a look at the standard game cartridge. I think this is probably the best design yet for the game cartridges on the Nintendo up to this point. The other ones were really bulky. The Nintendo ones, the NES ones were really good, and they stacked a little better. But these just look nice. They're a little smaller, and they're easy to push in. Like, some of them might have kind of a harder time pushing in. That just goes like that. Not a huge deal. This game had a really classic library, but I'll tell you more about that once I get to talking about the system. And finally, that's about it, actually, for the console. Let's test out some games and plug it into the TV and see how good it is. N64 took our classic 8 and 16-bit heroes to the max with games like Super Mario 64, Star Fox 64, Kirby, Yoshi's Story, and Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. It also had several original games such as Glover, Diddy Kong Racing, Paper Mario, Super Smash Bros., and a shitload of Pokemon games. Hey you, Pikachu! Yeah, it doesn't even say my mic's plugged in, and it is, so... yeah, this game sucks. Of course, it also had a share of sports games. And bad games, but, I digress. Unfortunately, the buttons are really sticky, like the L and R specifically are really bad. But the buttons aren't that bad. Ironically, the Super Pad 64 I showed you guys earlier, which kind of suck, has less sticky buttons, which is kind of a trade-off for the less comfortableness, I guess. The music on this, of course, is an improvement, like the sound quality, but there's nothing as classic as like the original Mario theme and stuff. The graphics on this, of course, are worlds better, as I showed earlier, and the new 3D environments are really enhanced compared to the old one. It kind of changes the gameplay a little from just side-scrolling things to really advanced 3D options. Personally, I prefer the side-scrollers just because they're a little more basic and just something you can do quicker when the other ones you have to save and do for a longer period of time. But the price on these guys are around $30 right now on eBay. As I'm scripting this, one's going for $22 with all the cords, one controller, and 3 games. So it's highly affordable. Also, I don't see any clones floating around the web, so you're going to have to buy a used one off eBay if you want it. This system is the bridge that linked the modern gaming and the old 8-bit gaming, and it is a definite must-have if you're a fan of classic games. That's what earns this system a 9 out of 10.